there's nothing worse than having the teacher make the subject that you love unenjoyable. And so many times coaches, we do that with basketball or with a sport, and we've got eager students, but we don't do our part to be in command of our curriculum, in command of our competencies, in command of our craft. And what happens is we take the best subjects on earth and we make them unenjoyable. And that is just a cardinal sin, but that's why coaching is teaching. Their students, they're learning. Learning is completely an enjoyable thing. When we make it just a box checking exercise or we don't connect what we're doing on a daily basis with greater purpose, that coaching goes away from teaching. I think that building the two together is what just makes it more relatable.
Welcome to the Jamodi podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we're joined by the assistant men's basketball coach at Rice University, Nelson Terroba. Coach Terroba is in his first season at Rice. Over his career, he's done it all, from junior high to high school, select basketball and professional basketball, as well as working at PGC and Snow Valley Basketball School. Last season, he was the head coach of the Calgary Surge of the Canadian Elite Basketball League and led the team to a 12-8 record, a first-place finish in the Western Conference, and a 2023 CEBL Championship final appearance. Before his time in Calgary, he served on the coaching staff of the Texas Legends G League team, first as an assistant coach and defensive coordinator, and then as associate head coach. Coach Terroba served as head coach and general manager of the St. John's Riptide of the National Basketball League Canada from 2017 through 2019 and led them to playoffs both years. He was the head coach at Dripping Springs High School from 2004 to 2008 and associate head coach at Austin High School from 2008 to 2011. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
Are you ready to level up your team skill development? Well, Bology is here to support you in driving accountability and skill development. The Bology app is more than just tracking. It's a resource for enhancing skills, knowledge, and mindset across your program. Join coaches all across the country using Bology to simplify training and empower your athletes. Let's build consistency, accountability, and skill development together.
Coach, thank you so much for giving up your time. This has been a hoops talk I've been excited about for a while. I can't imagine how busy you are. I see the Rice gear that you got on. Congratulations on that job. And man, thank you so much for your time.
No. Thank you. Really, the thanks goes to you. You've been patient with me, and I'm glad that I could, carve out time to make sure I have a good conversation with you, Coach. I appreciate you.
This may be a hard question to answer, but, going from the G League, but then also up in Canada with the Calgary Surge, what are some of those differences that you've already noticed of what you're doing at Rice?
Yeah, I think anytime you can step away from the two spaces, you can step between assistant coaching, head coaching, and back and forth. Anytime you step back from head coaching, there's just a great opportunity for you to kind of see things that you may have missed when you were sitting in that chair. There's a great opportunity like where I'm at now to learn from somebody who's doing it in a way that you admire and respect, so that you can kind of sort of take notes from a distance. And that's what Coach Lanier is, just a guy who's just a great leader, a great man. So for me to be able to work in a space where I see somebody who's operating a high level program, but doing it with the sort of integrity and the sort of, care and attention to people that I think is something that's important to me. I think that's something that resonates with me at this stage in my career as well.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, though. Like the idea of being a head coach and then at this stage going to be an assistant, but I got to imagine with all the knowledge and experience that you have, how valuable it is for his staff to bring you on board, but then just, I guess, to celebrate you and continuing to have that growth mindset and acknowledging and seeing the different ways that it can be done. I don't know. That's impressive to me.
Well, I think it's just one of those deals where I think the timing was good. I probably wouldn't have done this with just anybody in terms of, taking that jump. But with Coach Lanier, worked with him years ago at the University of Texas.
Nice.
I was a student assistant way back when and a student manager. And he was, we worked together years ago, and he was spearheading the recruitment of TJ Ford, for those people who are in Texas and even America who know that name, our generation that would know that name. But he was very innovative, and he got me involved with just doing creative things with him, with TJ. And just was always, and now 20 plus years later, every step along the way, I've seen Coach Lanier just, he's always been a dynamic leader, dynamic communicator. But and this too, running a program and being around people, who can elevate into, the stratosphere of power. It's really neat when you see those same people that you knew before they got to a big space, and they are the same people you knew years ago. That's what I've seen.
And what a great example too, though, to keep in touch with people, to keep those relationships good, because that was a connection from a long time ago. And I think so many people are, I don't know, that may not be true, but it's possible for people to be in a job, in a space, and thinking about what's ahead, but not necessarily investing the time in those relationships that are right around them in that moment, not realizing that maybe 20, 25 years down the line, it may come back around to where, golly, because of that time you guys spent together, this opportunity is there. So I think great reminder for all assistant coaches, head coaches, players, man, to invest in the relationships that they're around right there, because you never know how it may play out later on in life.
It's true that you never know, but I guess what I would say is I agree with that statement, but I would also say that what I appreciate about this sort of extended relationship with Coach Lanier is just that I think that our connection was good early and always has been. It wasn't like an annual check-in or I just think it was a shared understanding of just kind of who each other was and what we were all about. And then I think both of us probably supported, each other's journey. Yeah. And I just think the timing came to be. So I think I agree with, retaining those relationships, but I would tell those young people and those young coaches and everybody else, players, just, they're just being yourself. And if yourself is the kind of, profile that creates a lasting relationship, that will be enough, in terms of keeping that connection, more so than just say, hey, set in your calendar for an every, 12 months. And, dude, I get these texts sometimes from people that,
just checking in with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's 1 year later. Exactly. So I would just say, the authentic connection, the earned respect and admiration is the way that I would say I would lean into for anyone.
Coach, I'm going to make a note of that, because I like for this to become, there to be a relationship from this where it's not just that we had one hoops talk one time years ago, and then, but I'm going to make a note of randomly texting you at times so that you can't get, no, that's good.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, hey,
respond.
When I talk about asking characteristics of great coaches, man, it's hard to put one or two or a list down. But if you had to choose a couple out of all the experiences that you've had at different levels of coaching, man, what are some of those things that great coaches have in common?
When I was this definition, or the answer to this question, was born definitely out of experience, personal experience, but then also was probably kind of rubber stamped when I was at the PAC in Leander, Texas, which is outside of Austin. I was running an AAU program there. It's called Centex PAC, and this was in between stops, and so I did that for 4 years. But as a director of Centex PAC and of basically an AAU kind of select organization, I had to hire 15, 20 coaches, right, out of the blue. And so, up to that point, I was managing myself as a coach and defining my own definition of what a coach is, and kind of working through that on my own, never having to basically kind of transfer that onto someone else. Right. So, but what happened is I learned after the first year, that as I hired, my first hiring of coaches was based on, well, you have playing experience, cool, you want to do it, great. It's low paying, so those two things work, and that's going to be probably really good for us. And then what I learned is that, that I never took the time to define what I thought coaching was for our organization and for those coaches. And it wasn't out of their own shortcomings that this was missed. This was because of my failure to communicate it and my failure to articulate what it is that I thought was important out of all the things that could be on the table for coaches. So after year one, with a couple of, misses on things, year two came up with, a model for what I wanted to do as far as we call it, a portrait of a master coach. But it had three traits. First one was EQ, the emotional intelligence. So the ability to perceive a player's needs, both emotionally, mentally, spiritually, just ability to kind of connect with that player on those fronts. And that can be as a teacher. How am I giving feedback? We call it kind of sweet spot awareness, just kind of being able to hit that player in their sweet spot in terms of challenging them, but also not making it too easy for them, right? So the first domain, I guess, would be EQ, emotional intelligence, for a great coach. And I think that at the end of the day, even coaching in pros, as I've seen in the pros, obviously, well, I'll go to the second piece, which most people think is most important with pros, which is the IQ piece. So you have the EQ with the emotional intelligence, the IQ, which is the basketball intelligence. And part of IQ had to do with, it's not just what you know about plays, it's can you run a championship practice? So we gave them training about how do you run a practice? How do you build a practice, right? And so you can't have IQ if you don't know how to build a practice, right? You don't have IQ if you don't know how to position your players optimally based on their skill set, right? And you don't have IQ if you don't have an ability to make, timely adjustments based on those things. So a lot of people know, they say basketball IQ, can I drop a play or whatever, but we wanted it to be focused around utilizing your player strengths and building a practice plan for us. Okay. And then so the third part of the definition, actually, and we shared some PGC roots, point guard college, but the third domain was shape.
Nice.
Point guard college. Yeah. So, the idea being some coaches we had were really good at connecting with players. Some coaches were really good at knowing the game. Some could do both, but then they were showing up to practice 5 minutes late, showing up to games, strolling in with whatever, not ready, not prepared, not driving a hard practice, but they were good, like, with these other things, but they just weren't modeling the behaviors of excellence that were important in that role as a youth coach. So for me, the third domain was the PGC, shape, those intangibles of spirit, communication, hustle, approach, precision, and enhancement. But just basically, for the people who don't know all those things and haven't been to PGC, it's just basically, are you modeling the behaviors of excellence in addition to talking the talk? Are you walking the walk so that people who are following your lead can follow with, kind of like a credibility about you?
Coach, I love those three pillars. To start, though, from the beginning, you said something that I think a lot of people, whether you're a high school coach that can hire assistants all the way down to the middle school, or a select coach building a program, I think you're right on the money. I've seen so many select programs when they're small, when it's just the founder and maybe one other, there is this just like you can feel it, the presence and that person's handprints, fingerprints on everything they do. But with every good organization that has success, they grow and they start to bring other people. And then does the quality control stay at a high level? And most of the times, I think what happened, and thank you for sharing, that is what happens, is it's like we almost don't know what we don't know. Like, oh, wow, not everybody does it this way. And then you lose enough teams, or you have enough parents calling you, whatever. And then you come up with a way to get this information to more people. But you said, just because, I think that's a misconception, is that just because you played, that means that you can coach. And I think you're right on the money. Do they have these three things? And some do, some don't, right?
Some do, some don't. And it's not bad if they don't.
Yeah.
And so to further the point of the three domains, their EQ, IQ, and shape, we then, we showed them that model. We said, this is what we define as coaching. You can do whatever you want, be your own person within these domains, but this is the way you're going to be evaluated. So then we did training based on those three domains, right? We did case studies that said, even though we were volunteers, we did training for them. And then what we would do is basically we said, you're going to be evaluated. So we had mid-season evals that the players would do based around those 3 domains and say, hey, rate your coach in EQ and this. Does he or she give you great feedback at the right time? Does he or she do this? And so then they would get feedback from players. And then we'd said that we're going to send a survey out to parents and they're going to evaluate you on these 3. And then you will do a self-assessment on these 3. And then I, at the end of the year, will give you that assessment based on these 3 domains so that now there's this kind of 360-degree feedback piece of it's, there's an accountability there. If you don't handle it right, it's going to be viewed as a potential negative. But the way we said it is like, at the end of the day, we're going to have feedback from a lot of different sources. And, if we're trying to act like we want to be better, I'm as up for inspection as anyone else as the leader of that group. So, you guys can evaluate me on these same domains as well. But that whole 360-degree feedback kind of piece was a nice way of letting them know, like, the kids are going to have a voice, letting the kids know, like, you're going to be able to know what to evaluate your coach on, not just these, a certain thing that you think is important. But we shared the definition in the parent meeting. This is what we say our coaches should do. You can expect this and you will evaluate them on this. So we just basically create shared definitions for everybody in the program to create that alignment.
Man, so important to frame that the right way. And that, like you said, because we have evaluations here and it comes out, it's just sent out to our parents. We have nothing to do with it. And if you don't have the expectation of, man, I want to grow. Like, I want to be told. I've realized a lot of players, and myself as a younger coach, I didn't want to be corrected. Like, I didn't want to be told that I wasn't doing things great. And so that the willingness to want that, like, it feels sometimes around here at Faith that it's like a gotcha. Like, hey, we're going to try to get you with this. So, like, be ready. But if you frame it differently for the point of, like, we're all going and we all want the same thing. We all want to improve. As coaches, we want to be the very, very best for our players. And players, we want that. And we're all co-creators of this culture. That's a great way to do it. And then you mentioned something too. I think you had those clear expectations at the very beginning with your parents, because what that did to me was it almost kind of gave them a lens to evaluate and look through, or else we don't know what lens they're using. What did they hear? What did they hear on ESPN one day that they're thinking that's real coaching, or what video from a coach at halftime that was actually, in my opinion, doing things wrong did they watch? And, so I think when you give those, and that's just to every coach, when you give those clear expectations to your parents, but then it also helps their lens for what to look for, to look for the right things.
Right. Yeah. It's just kind of reestablishing the debate, as far as the way we're going to, center our debate here. And, but I think that, I think at the end of the day, what it did more than I think it also sort of calmed everyone down in a weird way to say that you guys are thoughtful, you're intentional, you value the craft of coaching, you're respecting this whole thing, you are process based. Like, nobody would do all of this unless they were really about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think by just modeling that behavior and that commitment and doing the extra work for everyone to see, even in its own way, it diffuses problems, because people say, you know what, these people are thinking about these type of things. And even that puts people at ease sometimes.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Scoreboard Media. Scoreboard Media works with high schools across the country to run professional sponsorship programs on their LED scoreboards. Whether you already have LED and you just want to supercharge the revenue, or you want to use sponsorship revenue to buy new LED video scoreboards, Scoreboard Media can help. They work with sponsors and advertisers locally, regionally, and nationally who want to connect with your school's community. Email info@scoreboardmedia.com to start the conversation and see what's possible.
No doubt, Coach. That's you're right on the money. And I think I was talking with Coach Sharman White with USA Basketball, and he was talking about how what really trips coaches up or teams up is a lack of not just organization, but details. And he said, the more information that I give my parents, and things like schedules, practices, times, but also expectations for how all of the team and coaches are going to live. The more that I gave them that, the byproduct was it, because he didn't go into it with that intention of, if we do this, we'll have no parent problems. That's not the intention to start out, but a byproduct of being that intentional is that you have fewer problems. So like, I think if coaches are have a bad set of parents, right? And I use quotes for anybody listening, a bad set of parents, maybe that's true, but what could we have done to, like you said, almost like a preemptive strike at the beginning to help them maybe not be so terrible?
Well, disarmament, it's funny you say that about the calendar and everything else. Another thing, we'd have it all mapped out. And even when I was a professional coach in St. John, I had a player who played at St. Mary's in San Antonio, Marvin Binney, who, I still am close with, but he was a point guard for us. And, I'd ask him out, hey, what'd you appreciate about how we did things? What can we do better? But it's funny you say that about the calendar. He's like, from the start, just the fact that you sent out the whole season calendar, we knew when the days off were going to be. We knew when practice was going to be. We knew how to schedule the rest of our days and life and everything else. And the fact that we knew from the start was like so different, but also like awesome, because it just helped me kind of map out the rest of my days. And that helped me be a better pro. So even though, like we get caught up in like, you need to know the playbook, you need to know all this stuff, but you're right. Knowing how you're going to manage the rest of your life, and then the leader being able to communicate those parameters for you, so allows you to lean into your job more when you're there, and to step out of it and compartmentalize when you're not.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think you could be a great communicator, charismatic, the type of coach that people love to be around and want to follow. But if those details start to fall apart, the time you said practice was going to end, it's 30 to 45 minutes every time. There's changes constantly. But I think on the note of changes, they have to understand that in life, change happens. Things come up. Gyms that we thought we had rented, we don't. Opponents cancel. But here's the promise, parents, is that we will give you that information as soon as we can, and we will have answers for what we're going to do. But that when that stuff starts to work its way in, it's amazing how quickly people don't care as much about the charismatic, the knowledgeable, how much those things, I think, start to erode the trust that kids or parents have in coaches.
That's it. It's right there. You said it. It's about the trust you're building. That's the trust fund, that you're building every day. But that's also goes back to, I remember I worked a camp for years in Snow Valley camp in Santa Barbara, the original in Santa Barbara. And now, Coach Showalter's doing
Nice.
the one in Iowa as well. But that, tons of folks do. And it's the great camps. But I remember working those camps, and Coach Dave Bullwinkle he used to always work with the point guards, and he's great, still a great coach. He's a scout for the Bulls now, but he'd work with the point guards, and I worked with him several years there in the mornings. But he would always talk about, just them fulfilling their commitments. Just simple things like, you said to the big man you would do this. You meet him there. You say your teacher, just fulfilling your commitments one at a time. And even though it's such a simple concept, I remember I took it from those moments. But I just think that that's just something like, every time you tell somebody you're going to do something and you don't, that's a miss. That's a big miss. It's really a big miss. And so back to your point about just trust, it can be, the practice didn't end on time. It didn't start on time. The day off didn't happen the way it did. There's a surprise on schedule. Anytime you surprise somebody, they don't like it. And there's a chance that you're eroding.
And I'll tell you, I wonder if other coaches out there feel this way. I don't get that stressed or worried about the games, because at that point, I mean, if we have practiced correctly, put in the time, the plan works, there's a belief in the players, if those things line up, the game will take care of itself. It was the stuff that sometimes were outside of my control. An opponent canceling the day of the game. Those are the things that, like, over the course of the season, I would just dread, like, please don't happen, because I've always felt, even if they know that it's not my fault. If enough of those things start to happen, it's like they start to think maybe it's me. And so it's like, how can we have to control as coaches, we have to control the things that are in our control and the things you mentioned, and then do our very, very best to pivot and to adjust. But I think if those things outside of our control do happen, but we're also not taking care of the stuff that we should be taking care of, those are no-win situations.
Yeah, and I think a different way of looking at it, that I sometimes tell the players, and these little hiccups, these little missed opportunities for commitments, it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. Eventually it's not the first 500 cuts that get you, but by the time you get withered down and beaten down by these broken commitments, these failed trust issues, all these things, they start to add up. Then all of a sudden you're like, it's by the error number 500, that's when things break apart.
Yeah.
And people wonder what happened to Billy today? Why did he lose his way? And they have no idea. It's because Billy's been, promised something 10 times. He's been let down 12, and he's tired.
Yeah,
that's it. And you're wondering, why did he act out? Well, he must be having a bad day. And the reality is, he's been misled. He's been, he hasn't been treated with respect.
Yeah. But then the opposite is true too. Like, how do we build trust? It's with 1,000 little things. And it takes a lot of time. And the trust fund, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. You build that up, and then that way you can weather, a couple bad ones. And you say, listen, this one wasn't on the radar, like you're saying, the cancellation and the things that come up. Want to have something in the tank there where people say, push comes to shove, I can trust this person that they're giving doing their level best to do right by me.
Man, I'd love to hear a little bit about your PGC history, because I can't think of a moment in my life in coaching that was a bigger game changer than because I had attended a couple as a player back in high school with Dick DiVenzio, but then to be able to direct for them shaped me in a new way. So what's your history with them?
Yeah, I got on, I think I just went to observe a camp. It was Chad Sanji and Tyler Costin back in.
Wow. That's a good duo right there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably, I was a coach at Dripping Springs around early 2000. So it's been a minute. Chad was just getting started as a director way back when. It was a day camp there. One of my friends, Matt Jasinski, who was a coach, found out about it. He said, well, you're going to go do this thing. And I said, I'll give it a shot. It was like a 2-day deal. And then, yeah, man, I was just blown away by, again, the teaching, the ability to kind of like change behavior. You talked about what's some of the traits of a good basketball coach is the first question you asked me. But I sometimes say, like, if the words that are coming out of my mouth don't create a desired behavior, if they don't create the desired behavior or a behavior change or a behavior enforcement or a continuation, then the words really are a waste a lot of times. So I think when I watch PGC, just their intentionality with how they used words, how they used video, how they connected words, video, and on court was just uniquely elite. And it just makes you a better teacher. And it just shows you a way of teaching that is unique. And I think it was very, very formative for me as well.
And those guys that you mentioned, Chad, Tyler, like, they're incredible. But we also got to give, like, Dina Evans a lot of props for she trained them. And then you got to go back even farther. I mean, to Dick. And I reached down because I had running the show. I'm going through it again because there's a whole part for coaches. There's a whole part reminders for players. And the golden nuggets that are in this, the sticky language that he used, I think what it does too for coaches, and the language is what I took away from it too. It makes you think about the way you talk to your team and the way you teach what you teach, and how can we simplify it? How can we make it sticky? How can we use creativity to make it long lasting? Like, for us, we don't want players to come to the ball when Either a guy has it in his hands, you got to ask two questions. Does he need help or does he need space? If he needs space, don't come towards him. And then when he does start to attack a gap, stay away. And we call it, don't be creepy. And that idea, like, you're being creepy. Like, it's saying all of those things that I want them. Stay patient, stay away, allow that gap to stay open. Don't walk toward it. All of those things that I could just throw out in one little phrase, being creepy, and it changes. And it does exactly what you said. And then just to give a little bit more credit to now where Mono Watts has taken it to PGC to a whole other level. All of those guys love them. They're not a sponsor of the podcast, but I'd be honored.
Yeah, no, that's a nice play. Well played. No, I think, if I can help with that, great. But no, I think that, they do deserve credit. And, I think another part of it is when you see the power of how they use those techniques, and they are techniques, to create desired outcomes in short amounts of time.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, like they can get that type of behavior change in that short of a window. Imagine what I could do over the course of a season if I could, nail my principles down, nail my language down, nail my concepts down that way.
Well, I love the fact that you used in your pillars, the EQ, the IQ, and then you shaped as its own pillar. Like, that's really interesting because what I was guilty of, what I think most coaches, you go to a clinic or a camp, you hear something really good, and you just take it home and you dump it all on your team. So in one summer, we went from one culture to, hey guys, now we're shape. We're going to put shape on our back. We're going to all memorize all the letters. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there was no ownership on their part. It was just something I forced on them. Now, again, that's a little bit different than, you're teaching your coaches those standards, which is great. But even with our teams, like, we may have some other things that we feel are really important that we stand for, but man, you got to look at something like shape as an overarch or an umbrella, or like, to me, that's almost the glue that holds EQ and IQ together right there.
Yeah, 100%. And it's I think it allowed, again, it was a good way to teach and hold people accountable, in quotes, accountable to a standard, or to better put, instead of holding them accountable, is building a clear roadmap to success.
Yeah.
And some people, it is holding someone accountable, but actually before accountability, it should be that you're building a shared vision of what success is for everyone here. That's what a good coach, a good teacher does, is let's build a shared definition, a shared vision, and a shared process that we're going to use to get to where we want to get to. And that lets everybody take part and lets everyone know a little bit about the rules of engagement.
Yeah. What you're talking about is it gets people committed from the very beginning and committed in the same thing. One of the things we do at PGC that always, at first, it made me a little uncomfortable, was we make commitment statements. And that commitment statement, we have to read in front of everybody. And every time that we do a new session with new people, I'd have to read mine, and we had our players do it. But you hold somebody accountable to something that either they're not committed to, or you don't even know what they're committed to. So again, going back to clarity, making sure that they know what those standards are, it allows them to commit to them, and then you can hold them accountable.
I think that goes back to the clarity pieces. That's one that I always lead with in some of the whenever I do a clinic, was high clarity equals high performance. And, I think that's it. I mean, people just, sometimes, I know it's a bit of an art and a science, but I think a lot of people, leaders want to be collaborative, right? They want to be, diverse, like they don't want to micromanage people, right? But there's sometimes like this inability by the leader to still drive a clear set of standards that is really critical. Like, by delivering clear standards, that's the art, right?
Yeah.
I deliver a clear standard that everybody can kind of push their behavior around these tent poles. Can I do that? Let everyone retain their personalities, let them retain their autonomy, their decision making, but can I tether that to a shared set of standards that everybody can rally around? That's really important. And if you don't do that, if you're not doing that as a head coach or an organizational leader, all you're doing is giving people just a couple of direction points, to kind of point their GPS that they know where to go. And everybody knows how to drive, but not everybody knows where we're going to. So let's share that same destination, and let's also share some of the, you can take lefts and rights along your way. You can take the highway if you want, but we're still getting to this shared destination.
Do you feel like that idea right there is even more important for today's players and today's parents more than ever before? Because I don't see many coaches talking about today more of the Bobby Knight style of, or my coach Dave Bliss, like in college, like do this or else. That's not there's not many clinics of that, but there are a lot more clinics of kind of the culture that you're talking about. Do you feel like that's more important today than ever before?
It is. I mean, for instance, the reason I learned it is because, as a young coach, I was probably leaning more into this emotional, theatrical type of coaching, which, was authentic for me. It was what I'd seen, and it was true. I mean, I was reacting to real situations, and it wasn't like fake or anything. But what happened is, and I've said this in different places before, but, I got fired 2 years into my head coaching career at my own high school, Dripping Springs High School. And, when I look back to reflect on it, it shaped so much of how I've approached almost everything in the profession in terms of, number one, this kind of 360-degree feedback piece. Like, I don't want to be surprised by somebody saying that you're fired or you're not doing your job. I want to know before something happens that something's about to happen. But what I learned from that is, after the dust settled and I had, a very creative and high performing player that I was battling with just because of, maturity, both he and I, to be honest with you, as a young coach. And I felt like I was right by standing up for, what the team needed me to stand up for. And I wasn't wrong. But what I was missing was that I felt like there was only one way to get him to align with our team standards and our team mission, right? And that was through me battling him, and standing my ground and everything. After the dust settled and I started thinking about it, I remember as I went to Austin High after that. But I remember thinking at first I felt, wronged for being fired and everything else. But after a while, I started to kind of reason out to myself, if I'm trying to act like I'm trying to be a great teacher or a great coach, the great teacher, the great classroom teacher doesn't just reach the wonderful students who already come to class on time, are ready to go, have all their supplies and have predisposed to learning and love it. Those are the easy, loyal soldiers to lead. Any coach can do that. That's not a noble undertaking. That's a fun undertaking to get, that opportunity to coach people that are so willing, right? That's when we're lucky as coaches and that everything's great. But if you want to be considered a great coach and teacher, I have to be able to connect with and also teach and get more creative, more tricky students, more, quote, difficult students. How do I get them to get in the fold with everybody else? Now that is quite a noble undertaking. So if I can do that, then that would actually make me a great coach, because that would mean I could reach all my students, not just the ones that were easy to reach.
Wow. Coach, thank you for sharing that about your story. You said you had talked about it before, but I didn't know that. And, one, I think it's a great example of learning from failure, because we want our players to learn from their mistakes and to have a growth mindset and a next mentality. But man, I wonder how many times we take our own advice in that. Like, how often when bad things happen, do we only blame and we never look at ways to grow? And that failure or that change in job there, man, puts you on a way different path. And so I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, it did put me on a different path, and it wouldn't have allowed me, we're talking about this, your question and perspective about, this approach to coaching. I would have never been able to be a pro coach, a coach of professionals, if I hadn't learned, how to lean into competency, lean into the craft, lean into teaching, well, and corrective measures and finding different ways to teach and all those things that create the behavior change. It's what's allowed me to be, an effective professional coach. But why that's, kind of everywhere, not just in the pros now with professionals, if I'm coaching a professional, I'm coaching a grown adult person.
Yeah.
I cannot talk to them recklessly, right? They have full license to respond to that, however which way they want to, both either verbally or physically. And they have that ability because it's an adult, and people don't go into workplaces and talk to peers and adults that way. So you have to, teach and coach as a professional with a professional. And so that's a great lesson for me as, I'm here at Rice now, or if I was back in high school, I would still coach the same way because at the end of the day, what's happened is young people at a younger age are exposed to more truths, more access to information. And because of that, some people say, well, this is a different change in times and, time for the old times. But really what we've done is we've accelerated people's ability to understand what is, a good standard, what's bad.
In their eyes. Yeah.
In their eyes. And they're more educated. So,
yeah.
So quicker. And I think that is what helps, whether, we have recruits on, at Rice on a recruiting visit, and I just talk to them about basketball. How do you see yourself fitting? What's your perfect role? Just an open conversation about basketball. What's the best usage of you? What do you expect me? I always ask that as when I was a head coach at Calgary or wherever, I'd always interview the players, and I'd always ask them at the end, what do you expect from me as your head coach? So that I know what their definition of what my job is, and those kind of things are important because we assume that the position gives you the authority to do whatever you want, but really the position gives you the opportunity to work with people and get them to where it is you want, all of us want to be.
Yeah, I love that question. And what was the normal response? Did you get surprised quite a bit that you asked them that? Were many players able to quickly articulate what they're looking for? What was that like?
Yeah, I think, again, talking to players after the fact, in review, after seasons and stuff, just to see what stands out to them. I think, in those same conversations, I'm telling them to tell me their perfect role in their own words, using all of your skills. Describe to me, what position are you playing? What, how are you being used? What actions are you coming off? Paint the picture, everything, and make them tell me. And a lot of times that self-assessment is empowering because no one's ever asked them to tell somebody else that. But when I'd ask players, I think that's one thing that stood out to sometimes players would say. I had a great player, Steph Smith, who, played for us last year at Calgary. He's in France now. Great player, great point guard, great leader. But one thing he said when I spoke to him, in after the season when I visited him in France, is just from the start, the questions you asked me from the start when we first, interacted on the phone, I could tell, that you were different and had a different approach, and you were really on top of, what you were doing. But to answer your question about their responses in terms of what they expected from coaches or from me, it's a lot of times is tell me the truth, hold me accountable, don't sugarcoat it, things that we would want them to say to now.
And not using that as I got you, hey,
no,
you said that you want, no, it's an ability to bring them close, to be listen, you and I both know what you want. And a way to actually to get them to where they want to be and be a part of that. I think it's you keep using disarming. I think that's a really good way to describe it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's, it's a conversation. That's another thing I learned over the years now working with adults and, I would do it for any player from now on. At the end of the day, it's a choice. You know what I mean? I'm going to tell you here, you like mid-range twos. Okay. I'm going to show you what the math says. Typically, I'm going to show you, and I'm not against mid-range, right? But I'm going to show you what the math says. I'm going to show you what your math says, not only the general math, but your math. I'm going to show you when you're more successful. I'm going to tell you this becomes a choice. And it's not that you can't shoot middies, but when is the time to do it? Oh, you're saying late clock. I agree. Late clock is a good time. Oh, you're talking about against a deep drop, pick and roll, and you're that guy. 100%. That's the right time. Is it in the first 8 seconds? Is it without a paint touch? No, they answer the questions themselves. So a lot of times it's just making sure you're on point and being able to tell them those truths in a way where they understand that at the end of the day, and I tell them this, we can do whatever we want here. I want you to be aware of, if you're in this pro space or you're in college now and you're being evaluated, you should at least be aware of how you're being evaluated by these people in these front offices and things like that. And whether or not you agree with it or not, if you don't like the numbers, then forget about it. We don't have to focus on numbers. But if the numbers, there's no reason you should be scared of using the numbers to your advantage as opposed to ignoring them.
Do you think you can have that type of professional talk with college players and then also with high school players? Or do you feel like age or maybe stage in life has something to do with it?
I think you can have it with everybody. I think it's really, really a great tool as a coach and teacher. I think that what you might do, though, I think you might use stories at all levels to help connect where they're at to where they might want to be, or where they're at to where they once were, and using stories to help them understand that we're doing it this way, whether it's, with a player who's about to get cut, or, I said, listen, that's what to this day, like, hey, listen, you may not want me to tell you this, but the reason you're not playing more right now is because of 1, 2, and 3. I could tell you nothing. I could help make you guess about it. But me personally, I lost a job that was really important to me, and I never knew why I lost that job. I never was told. I was never given an opportunity to fix it, and I really would have fixed it if I had a chance. So I am telling you because I would rather be told myself, and I think I owe it to you or any professional, and I would do it with any player or any staff member who's working with us, that these behaviors, if you don't change them, will affect outcomes that are important to you. If that doesn't matter to you, no problem. We keep it moving. But if it does matter to you, you deserve to know what is going to affect your ability to get what you want.
I would encourage, high school coaches, and I really took a lot from what you just said, to talk to our players the same way. Because I don't know how often me raising my voice or looking really ugly or intense at a kid got the desired outcome, what I want, which is, did they hear what I said? Did they accept it? And now are they going to implement it? I think all it was is maybe they heard, but they're just pissed off and they feel like we're enemies now. And so I think that's maybe, and I don't know if that's age or experience or losing relationships with players, whatever it takes to get us to realize that talking to them as professionals in a calm manner, using facts, using commitments that we know that they've made, which all circles back, though, to what you've said a bunch of times, that you're sitting down having one-on-one meetings. I think we can't lose that if we're not doing that, if we're trying to do all of this in a group setting, thinking that we're going to make these one-on-one connections there, I think we're missing out.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that this goes back to the EQ piece we started with. Sometimes there's that player that needs, again, there's a specific tangible story. So when I was at Drippin, I'd get sideways with this and that. And then when I was at Austin High, I had a player who was tricky, who I love, like his son still to this day, had great success. But I just changed. I remember I knew we would get to a point in the practice where it would be the defensive shell. He might like dip out, like not be engaged or whatever. And instead of just like being mad about that or knowing it was coming, as they're warming up before practice and they're getting their free shots, they say, "Hey, come over here. Let me show you the practice plan today." And I show them the practice plan and I say, "All right, I got this, and here. What do you think? Anything I'm missing?" He's like, "No." I said, "See here at the 60-minute mark, we're going to do the shell drill." I said, "Now at this time, I'm going to turn up crazy and I'm going to expect all kind of crazy things. And I'm probably going to get on your rear end about some things that aren't going on. I just want you to be prepared. I want to make sure you're okay with me getting after it at that moment in time, because I think the team's going to need it. And if they see you handle it the right way, then I think it's going to be really good for the team." Right? So all I did is I just prepared him and he's like, "I got you, coach, for sure." And then that moment comes and he's ready and he's locked in and everybody, and the team soars because they see that the best player on the team who they may have thought may have disengaged, or maybe they're a little disengaged. They're like, yo, the best player on the team, he's ready to go. Like, it pushes them over the hump. And by handling that way, as opposed to waiting for it to happen and then getting mad when it happens the way I thought it would, just a totally different strategy and a totally different set of results.
Man, what a great story right there. And again, it goes back to that player became a co-creator in that practice with you. The more ownership that we can instill and give in our players goes back to a little bit of what we said about parents and those expectations that we set. How many landmines can we sidestep by them being a part of what we're doing, not just bystanders that are being moved around like chess pieces? I think that's a great example of that.
The Jamodi podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
It's just respect. It's really what it is. It's just respect. I mean, I think that I say this on different things, but like, I think that the high school coach, and the college coach can learn from the pro coach in terms of terminology, efficiency, just cutting right to the chase. The practice is quick. The practice is efficient. There's no wasted motion. We don't spend a lot of time. And also that the language is tight and everything is unemotional, but diagnostic prescriptive, right? But when, the pro coach should learn from the high school coach, the pro and college coaches should learn from the high school coach, which is, I'm glad from my experience, having coached 10 years in middle school and high school, is that, sometimes you're in the college or you're in the pros and the coaches are like, man, we need better players. GM needs to get me better players. The assistant coaches, you guys got to get me better players. We need to recruit better. And you don't take ownership over the team that's in front of me is the team that I'm in charge of. And it's my job to get these guys good, whoever they are. That's what the high school coach does. And sometimes the pro and college coaches lose sight of that. Whoever's in front of you is your team, and it's your job to get the best out of them.
Hey, great reminders right there. It made me think of when Wes Watson, he's at McKinney High School, and I was his varsity assistant for 5 years. And after it's interesting about what you learned after moving on from Dripping Springs. That's where we were. After moving on from there, what I learned after losing seasons here, and what me and Wes learned after losing seasons, I think a lot of the best growth in our profession, our lives, comes after failure or downtime. Like, if you allow it, right? And so we had a rough season, and we wanted to make a change. He wanted to press. I wanted to get playing a little bit more up-tempo offensively, and dribble drive was becoming a big thing with Calipari at Memphis, which shows the date of that. But we kind of sat there like, well, can we do this if we don't have shooters? But it was kind of this light bulb moment. Well, what can we do? Because we're not going to go out and just find some shooters. We got to create them. We got to make them here. And that was a big shift in our mindset. So I think, like, what can a coach take from that is, how do you love to play? What do you want your program to be like? And if you can't go out there and nowadays buy it, right, find it, do you create it? And I think that's maybe where it goes back to the creativity and drills and culture, knowing who you are, comes into play.
And I think that's the thing that I think has been good for me, is just the range. What allows me to be a good professional, or allowed me to be a good professional coach, is the fact that I teach in such a way that it could be picked up by a 7th or 8th grader.
Nice.
Okay. And that's not because I'm dealing with people who can't pick up bigger concepts. It's because that's what good teaching is. You know what I mean? Like, it's not supposed to be tricky to figure out how, we're doing what we're doing. And that's, another quote that I like is I think it was, it's an American general, maybe MacArthur, but he says, my job isn't to give orders that can be understood. My job is to give orders that cannot be misunderstood. And I think that's what I find to be the rubric for the directions that if I'm giving directions, they have to be so clear that they cannot be misunderstood. It's not enough that somebody could pick them up. It's got to be that nobody can misunderstand them.
And Danny Henderson said that at a clinic, and he would actually have one of the players. He would give him the direction, and he'd say, "Now I want you to tell your teammates in a way that they cannot be misunderstood." And you see the kid, he'd say, he'd be like, "Nope, not loud enough. They cannot." And then he would hold the whole group accountable if it wasn't run correctly. I think a big takeaway for me in that is the ability to say less. Like in practice, say less, but still get your point across. Maybe film yourself one practice and just count on a clicker how long you're actually talking, how long it takes you to teach things. That may be helpful.
Yeah, another one that I think is good is instead of, you'll say you've taught something, going back to checking for understanding, but, instead of saying, hey, I can't believe you didn't tag right there, you're the single side or whatever, you're tagging for the loaded side or whatever, I just go back to, set that play up again. Okay, run that action. Okay, instead of saying, you should have done this, I'd say, Matt, show me what you're supposed to do right there in the low hole. Y'all run the action. Boom. He does it, and he tags, and he gets back out. He does it right. I say, well, okay, what did you just do? Yeah. It was different. And they'll be like, oh, I was out here. And then I said, okay, so now you know what we got to do. Yeah, got it. So let's go to it. And that's a different way of getting to the heart of the matter, where you put that person right into the problem-solving, matrix there, where they have to tell you. And then what happens is when you say, show me, and they show you something wildly different, it's a way of you finding out that your teaching wasn't as clear as it needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of blaming the players, extreme ownership says, like, I'm not doing something right enough.
Right. And it's just, again, these are just ways to, just check for understanding. It's just reducing blind spots. You know what I mean? And another thing, on these notes of like, you're learning, it's from Dave Bullwinkle too at Snow Valley back when, years ago, but I always took it. And then I read the Teach for a Champion book, and it had one of these strategies in here, but I'll do this at the end of practice, especially in training camp or any practice. I'll say, hey, close your eyes, and I'll wait. Coach Bullwinkle used to say, just, tell me one thing you learned today, one thing you learned. And the kids would pop up. And what I learned from Teach Like a Champion was, I'd say, I want you to think about everything we did today and just close your eyes. When you're ready, raise your hand, and I'm going to wait for everybody's hand to be raised, and then I'll call on somebody. And then I'd say one thing you learned today. And then what I'd force the students or players to do is think back to the start of practice and make them internalize all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, when I went 12 around, no, he said that already. There's one more. They couldn't believe all the things that you could pick out 12 things every day that are completely, you wouldn't be able, you'd be amazed. You could pick up 12 things every day in practice. And then when you make the players do that, you're making them recruit all that information. And then when they're hearing it from somebody else and they're thinking, man, I just had to think about that. And the one thing I came up with was closing out with a high stick hand early on a closeout or whatever. And he can't know what he thought about transition. That's right. I forgot about that and so all of a sudden you create like engagement because they're wondering, what is anyone else going to come up with this answer for?
And I wrote down, like, and also I feel like it helps us to not to be fooled. And what I mean by fooled is thinking that our players are getting it, thinking that they have the culture down, that they know what the expectations are. Because if you're only going off of little Timmy, who answers every time that you just ask a question, okay, you're assuming what he's saying the entire group gets. And I think the more that we can do things like that, because you don't want to tell little Timmy, hey, no more today. You've answered enough. But you want to know if everybody's getting and hear more voices. And I think that's a great way.
It's critical because you're right. Little Timmy is the one who's drowning out the blind spots.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I'd wait. And, usually some of those kids who are kind of either too cool, or too shy, to use point guard terminology.
There you go.
But too cool or too shy at the end, that they you just crack through. And basically, again, you are creating an environment where participation is expected, it's rewarded. Uh, and if you as a coach kind of cringe when you hear some of these strategies like, "Ooh, I would never want to ask my kids what they learned today," or "I would never want to tell a kid, hey, show me what you're supposed to do here," and that makes you cringe as a coach because you're like wondering what might happen. That's its own indicator to you that that maybe your teaching isn't as clear and tight as it needs to be, such that it can be held to that standard.
Yeah. And there's a level of giving up control there, because you're giving up control of time because every coach is jealous of their time, right, in practice. But you're also giving up control to other voices. And I know as a younger coach, that was really hard for me to do. How we frame these things, the words, the way we ask questions, so important too. And to go back to PGC, a big thing that they taught, Chad was the one that I took away, was how you ask for questions. And so the way this sounds is what I think I used to do and what most coaches. Any questions? Any questions? The problem with that, I never thought anything of it, coach. I just thought that's a normal way to ask that question. But when you ask it like that, there is going to be fear, a feeling of fear of, ooh, I don't want to be the one that looks like an idiot and is the only one that has this question, even though we all know probably more people. So the way that you free them up is you ask, what are your questions? What are your questions? Instead of any questions, what are your questions? As if it is assumed that there will be some and that is encouraged that there are some. But you can take that little phrase right there, but think of everything that you're saying to players. Why that shot? Hey, let's talk about that shot. What are your thoughts on that shot? How would you rate that shot? The way that we ask these questions, coach, we can dive into the deeper part of what players are really feeling. Or I think, like you said, we can make them feel unsafe.
I think so. I think, one of the things I learned when I was at Austin High, I took a training for History Alive, which was a history book that we had, and they had training for teachers. And it was probably the best training that I ever took in terms of teaching, and it worked with their textbook and it had all kind of things that worked with it, but it was really good. But I mean, just the idea of just think, pair, share, or visual discovery, like sometimes I'll have a slide up there with stats or something that I'm wanting to, demonstrate to the guys. And I'll just say, Steph, tell me one thing you see here on the screen. There's no wrong answer. Just tell me one thing you see. And they'll be like, there's a lot of big numbers here. I said, yeah, those are the numbers. Those are the points per shot, on this shot chart here. So that tells you when a shot gets taken from that area, how much it's worth, Then all of a sudden, I was like, okay, so I made it okay to just discover without, knowing the whole answer. And when you do the think, pair, shares, do that all the time with like our guys, just what's one thing that's going wrong with the team, one thing we could do better. Write it down in your phones. Okay. All right. Now partner up with somebody. You guys discuss it. Okay. Pick somebody who's going to share it. And all of a sudden you have a discussion. It's fantastic. Right. And everybody's primed and everybody's participating because you warmed them up just like we warm up, dynamic, warm up our body. You got to do that with the mind and with communication too.
You've connected this so much throughout our talk about teaching. And I think as coaches, most of us would say like we teach the game, but you're talking about training like for classroom teaching, but how that's crossed over into how you coach. In your opinion, like what is the connection between teaching and coaching when some people from the outside might see at every high school there are coaches and there are teachers and that there's a difference between those two, but how do you connect them?
Well, I think they're one and the same, but I think that basically coaches a lot of times are getting to teach the student's favorite subject, and in this case in basketball. But what's sad about that and what's telling why it is teaching, I think, is because here's what I'd say is we've all had teachers. For instance, I'm not like a math zealot or, somebody who's, I'm not against math. I'm not against science. I'm not against English. I don't think I was just excited about any one of them, like to a high level. But what would excite me to go to class was teacher, right? And so sometimes, I had chemistry, which is brutal. I had a great teacher, and I actually didn't mind it much, right? And I had maybe, something that I enjoyed more, journalism or something writing wise, and the teacher was really bad at history, and the teacher was brutal, and I didn't want to. I remember it was a UT. There was a guy, old prof. He'd get up there, 90-minute class, and straight up at the podium, just talk for 90 minutes straight on just from that moment in history to the end of 90 minutes, and there was nothing more to it. But one thing I want to say to coaches here, which is something we take for granted, is there's nothing worse than having the teacher make the subject that you love unenjoyable. And so many times coaches, we do that with basketball or with a sport, and we've got eager students, but we don't do our part to be in command of our curriculum, in command of our competencies, in command of our craft. And we don't respect the people. And what happens is we take the best subjects on earth and we make them unenjoyable. And that is just a cardinal sin, but that's why coaching is teaching. You have to, they're students, they're learning. Learning is completely an enjoyable thing. No human does not like to learn new things. That's just not how we're built. But a lot of times, when we make it just a box checking exercise or we don't connect what we're doing on a daily basis with greater purpose, that coaching goes away from teaching. I think that building the two together is what just makes it more relatable.
Coach, I almost feel like I need to show you, but while you were first talking about this, I just made a little note because I was ready to come back around to it. I said, don't steal their joy. They love it. Like that, you nailed it. Like I was an English teacher for 5 years at McKinney. Between you and me, I couldn't stand it. Like I had no passion for it. They just made me do it. I wanted to be a speech communications teacher because I actually went to school for that. But like some places, they don't put you in the best spot to be successful. Well, maybe that's another thing too. Like, do we know what makes our players successful and put them in those spots? But I used to go into that every day, like almost feeling like I was in their shoes of, guys, this is brutal what we're doing here. Like I get it, and try to, but in a creative way, actually try to get them to get work done but in basketball, like we don't have to do that because most of them are choosing to be there and they love it. So what's our responsibility? Man, don't steal their joy. Like being a kid is hard. I don't care what era you grew up in. I had teammates that were like kind of physically abusive sometimes in high school. It was hard. Like I tried to do my very, very best not to. Sometimes, man, these kids, like, what they have going on at home. Like, what if this is the best hour of their day? Like, we need to be protectors of that. I'm so glad that you said that.
I agree with that, but there's a lot of manifestations of stealing their joy. Sometimes it's that you make it like you berate them. Sure, you belittle people. That's not fun. But sometimes you don't grow them. You
challenge. You don't challenge them.
You don't challenge them, and that's not joyful either, right? And sometimes you don't know that you need to challenge them some days and reward them other days. And you just it's just like a parental relationship almost, right? Where you have to give and take. And I think that some people would, if we just left it at don't steal their joy, somebody would say, well, that means keep it fun.
Yeah. Just play knockout the whole day.
Right. And it's not just about, but what, I guess that's another thing is redefining fun, and creating a shared definition of what that joy is. And that joy can be, man, taking on a big undertaking, like working together to solve big problems, learning how to communicate in a way that we've never done before, and to be able to trust people in a way that we never have experienced before, being able to do things in front of lots of people that are so impressive that we could have never thought were possible if we didn't do certain things. These are all things that we get into sports for, but that's the joy of it, is actually achieving the hard things, and not just, rolling out the ball and doing whatever.
Coach, I love that, redefining fun. And so I just kind of, and I don't want to be disrespectful to you. I was listening to what you're saying, but I also was like, what would be my definition of fun? And I think, man, if a coach is sitting here like, Take a second here, jot it down. Mine is, here's the equation: standards. So like we know what things should look like and feel like if it's done right, plus experimenting. Like if this is our laboratory, what happens in a laboratory? Explosions. We mess up. It can be messy. Plus great effort. That, all those three things in my mind, that equals fun. And there's going to be tough times in that and a lot of mistakes in that. And we're going to feel the weight of the standards some days, just like it's bearing down, but also some days those standards freeing us up to be in an environment where we can't experiment. But all of it, there has to be great effort, or else it's just rec ball, and that's not fun. So yeah, love that. Redefine your fun.
Well, and then, and you have to ask them, that's a classic think, pair, share, what will season enjoyable, and then they just write, hey, you got 2 minutes, write it down on your phone. We'll make this season, or this season will be a success if blank, and just making people answer these essential questions that we should all kind of, and just let that discussion happen, and more often than not, that discussion leads to exactly the same answers you would have presented to them as a coach or teacher, but it's way different when it comes from them. And, I think that's so key, is like letting them be like sort of the tour guide that gets them almost to their own destination sometimes. And then whatever they don't say, you can kind of lead them to the one or two parts they didn't hit. And you can say, but there's also this piece too. What do you guys think about this? Oh, yeah. We think that's good too. Okay. And, just having that dialogue is critical.
Coaches, we are all searching for ways to better evaluate players in order to give meaningful feedback. Over 15 years ago, I put together a test called the Jamodi Skill Rating. The JSR takes players through a series of tests involving basketball skill or athleticism, giving them one rating at the end. Their JSR rating will give you clarity on what needs to be discussed with players and parents on areas they need to focus on improving. I test our players at least 4 times each year. They're able to compete against each other, past players' scores, and most importantly, their past performances. If you'd like to start testing your athletes, email me at jamodipodcast@gmail.com for more information.
Coach, the speed round. These are quick questions that first thing that pops in your head, just go and blurt it out. The people that think they know you, they're really going to know you after this.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Amy's Mexican Vanilla. Austin, Texas special right there. Yeah.
Okay. So have to be in Austin to get that.
If you're ever in Austin, Texas, go to Amy's Ice Cream. Mexican Vanilla is the best one. You won't be disappointed.
All right. Greatest shooter of all time?
Steph Curry.
If you could choose 3 people to have like a dinner with all at the same time, and they can be from any time period, who would those 3 people be?
Always a good one. I would pick Greg Popovich. I would pick Larry David.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Seinfeld. And I would pick Dave Chappelle.
Good one. Are you a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan? I find myself, and I'm sure most people do, watching that show thinking, yes, like I completely understand how he feels about that. but not having the ability just to call somebody on it like he does in the show.
LD, he's the GOAT. Yeah, it's great. No, I love, that's funny. Like, I think one of the questions you sent me was like, what do you do after losses or something? And you see I'll pop in and curb your enthusiasm. And that's how I decompress. But yeah, no, I just like, those are 3 thoughtful individuals, that I think, in way different life experiences, way different, paths, but I just think they're super intelligent, completely different in the way their intelligence gets manifested. But they're also just very thoughtful people who, they produce, I don't want to say content, but, for lack of a better, they produce content that is unique, creative, but very substantive, purposeful. And it scratches way below the superficial surface, and those kind of people always interest me.
That's good. Favorite gym that you've coached in?
Favorite gym? Well, I mean, I wasn't like a coach. I mean, the favorite place I've been to, and I was a student manager back then, was the Fall Gallon Fieldhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible to beat that place. Favorite place I've coached in as a head coach would probably be, I would say, when I was in Canada, there was, well, I'm going to give my high school one, which is when on Austin High, I was just associate head coach with Coach Dudney, but he let me be a big part of that team. But my favorite was always playing Westlake at our place. Was a big rival, so the Austin High gym would get going for that one. But in Canada, we played once in a place called St. John's Edge, which is in Newfoundland out there. But anyways, it was St. Patrick's Day. It's a big kind of Canadian town, lots of Irish folks. So it was about 7,000 sellout, big weekend, and we had to kind of win 2 games to be in the contention for the playoffs, and we won. And those were some of the better games I've been a part of.
That's awesome. Best basketball movie of all time.
Well, I've got the Hoosiers one behind me here. I think I've got the
I see it.
which is good. Obviously, it's a great one. I'm going to go with Love and Basketball, just to surprise people. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about that one kind of puts it up there on the top? Like,
I just
how basketball brought them together. Like what? Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's just, I don't know, just the combination of all of it, like
Okay.
it's like, it is about the sport, which is great. And then Hoosiers, you got that one, which is great. But I like the connection to the real life in addition to the basketball too.
Texting or talking?
Depends.
That's the answer. Yeah. You nailed it.
Like, depends.
Yeah. Okay. Being in Texas here, for high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Yeah, when I was a high school coach, I used to think no shot clock. But now with my experience in the pros and then seeing things in FIBA and internationally and stuff, I think we should have a shot clock. I think it just helps the players develop because at the end of the day, when you're required to score within 24 seconds, it makes coaching have to be better. It makes players have to be better scorers, better defenders. Makes coaches have to cover more situations. And I think as far as the international landscape, it keeps us more competitive internationally. So because our players and coaches are playing in the same constraints that other folks are internationally.
Well said. Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
You're up 3 on defense with 5 seconds left. Do you foul or no foul?
Oh man, everybody I'll be honest with you, up to me, I think the answer would be over 10 seconds, no foul, probably under 8, if they're dribbling in the balls, everything you can chop them. But I'll be honest with you, I know I come from, the G League and the NBA, they're foul every time. And I know everybody does that, but I'll be honest with you, I still have a hard time fouling up by it.
What makes it hard for you? Just the fact that you're giving them points, like you're putting them on the line?
Well, no, I mean, and what was the question? Was it 5 seconds you said?
Yeah, it's 5 seconds, foul or no foul. Yeah. Like you're going to basically allow them to shoot 2 free throws.
Well, I think, if you practice it, first of all, you have to practice it because the reason and I would practice under 5, the answer would be yes, you foul, but you have to foul, on a pass, right?
Yep.
But you have to foul, you have to press up and make them put the ball on the ground. And when the ball's on the ground, you got to hit them on the way up, but you can't foul. Why I don't want to foul is because guys end up fouling shooters at the wrong time instead of, and you just put them on the line for 3. I'm not against putting them on the line for 2. But you've got to press up and basically take away that 3 and make them put it on the ground. And with the seconds on the ground, you can chop them and not let them get that hand raised up. I'm good with that, and you have to practice that. Or you foul, when the ball's in the air, the ball's in the air, you just go foul trying to make a play. Those 2 things I'm okay with. But fouling, when you're not there on the catch and when you're not pressed up, you're going to run into a shooter and get them out. That's the thing that makes me cringe.
I think that's a good point. Where the ball is really has a lot to do with that, I think, too. Is what book would you give someone?
Okay, depends on who. Is it for a coach or for?
I love that. Let's go coach.
Good one for a coach would be Good to Great's a good book for an organizational leader. It's more of a business book, but talks about, the traits of very successful companies. And I think it relates to coaching. I would say that, or I'll give 2 more honorable mentions. Legacy.
Oh yeah. The All Blacks.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great book for a coach, and talk about it. That's the best book I've seen on kind of capturing, articulating what culture is. That's a great culture book.
I think you could almost just take those principles from there. That would be a great starter kit. Like if you're going to a program, like, man, what kind of culture I want to build? Like take those, what they talk about in there, adjust it to, your level of play and everything. I'm not going to say it, but like one of them is no punks. Basically, I'll say no punks allowed. They use another word. Like at my school, we couldn't use that word, but no, but it's great. That's great.
I've been on really good behavior today with my language as well. So
I have the faith.
People,
I have the faith chair right there.
Yeah, people who know me will be shocked. But yeah, I think those two are great. And then also, just for a player, I think, and coaches too. But the Atomic Habits is another good one that people get behind.
Love it. Two more. Favorite place to travel?
Favorite place to travel? Man, I've been lucky. I've been traveling a lot in the last 5 years. I would say that I like Spain. We'll go Spain.
Yeah.
I like the whole vibe. It's so many nice places. The food's great. The tapas, sangria, the whole thing. It's good.
Nice. Last one. Now, for those that aren't watching, the picture behind you, I guess to your left, I can't tell with all this, but it's of Jordan. So here's the question. In basketball, who's the GOAT?
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably Jordan. I know, this is the one that everyone nowadays, younger people are going to say LeBron.
Yeah. That's the fun part of it, though, is you get to fight for your era.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I grew up watching Jordan, so Jordan's the one, for different reasons, but obviously LBJ is great. My favorite player probably, of all time though, is probably Manu Ginobili for the Spurs. Just the way he played and I love Steph, I would put Steph very easily could get into a GOAT conversation for me as well. Just the way he plays and leads. I mean, so much skill, so much like leadership, humility in the face of so much like attention and power. Like he's pretty impressive. So I got to give Steph an honorable mention too.
But I think that's a good point. I think the GOAT and favorite player, like those can be, because like one of my favorite players was Steve Wojciechowski from Duke back in the day. Yeah. I felt like that's a guy that I could kind of get behind a little bit right there. All effort, pure heart, but he's not the GOAT. Pistol Pete, favorite, of mine, helped me with skill work back in the day with his homework basketball tapes. But yeah, I think those.
Who's your GOAT?
Oh, Jordan. And yeah, Jordan. And but like the older coaches, like some of them will bring out a Kareem or a Russell, and it's hard to really argue with that, with the pure dominance of Kareem, and then the winning. Like some people consider what's the GOAT? Win the most. Hard to do that, but then seeing Jordan, and living in that time, and I think somebody else said this, and I thought was really good about, because like, what's the difference between him and LeBron? I think LeBron is great. Like I think he is on the Mount Rushmore, no doubt, of basketball players, but Jordan never deferred. Like if there was a big moment, he may pass to somebody that's wide open for a shot, but he was creating it. Like I've seen over the years, I feel like LeBron in big moments defer to teammates, but not in a situation where like you're creating success for them, but almost like you do it. And that's just my perception. But like, that's one thing I've seen him, like, you're the biggest, baddest dude on the floor. You either take it yourself or draw, create, because he's such a good passer. And then there are times where I see him not do that. And I think, Holly, if Jordan was there, like he's taking it or he's hitting Kerr, for a wide open shot, creating. Anyway.
It makes me think, I read about, you may have read this too, but Phil Jackson kind of, when he took over the Bulls, I remember reading this story. Basically, he told Jordan, listen, I want you to kind of limit yourself to 8 points in the first 3 quarters of the game, right? Focus in the first 3 quarters, 8 points each quarter. You'll be at 24, still good, but, concentrate on getting other people involved. In the fourth quarter, do whatever you want. Do your thing. But it was brilliant in the sense that, to the point of what you're saying, what LeBron does, more naturally, it was, let's make sure I'm making everybody else ready, and getting everybody else, part of this game, so that by the time it gets to that fourth quarter, people are worried about helping off Steve Kerr because they know he's already hit 3 threes. So I'm creating more space for myself. But if they do, he's also ready because I've gotten him ready. And I've shown him trust 3 quarters now, and I'm willing to make that pass, and he's willing to take that shot. So it was an interesting story about, Jordan and, something that always stood out to me.
Man. And then when you watch The Last Dance and you just see you're competitive. I was competitive. That's another level, though. Like another level that I don't think a lot of people get to. Now, there's a great article, and every year throughout the season, I'll just choose a random day to bring this out, but there's an article years ago about, do you still want to be like Mike? And it talks about how he can't turn that off. And he's empty at 50, that was at 50 years old, but now he's even older. And so like there's a cost, to that level. Can you turn off? Can you know when to not be competitive in your life? And I don't know.
I think that's why, like, I have to bring Steph into that conversation.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel like he's the most human, balanced.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know him, so, it could be fooling me too, but most human balance kind of, again, like Jordan at the expense of, punching Steve Kerr in the face and everything else. But Steph does it with such I want to follow you type of leadership, and I'm going to show you and I'm going to model for you, again, the shape thing. And he's modeling it, but he's also the freaking best,
He
like out there
game
all the time. Yeah. But he does it all. And like, he never throws anybody under the bus in the press, or he doesn't have subtweets. He doesn't ever do any like side shenanigans stuff. Like, he's just above board, and it creates a space. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about the NBA and the pros is when the best player, actually like a Steph or a Tim Duncan or old school Giannis before he got a hold of Bud and got him fired. But these guys who allow the coaching to happen, who embrace the standards of the place, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jokic, these guys just allow the building to operate at a high level. They're and in college or in high school, the coach is the standard bearer and the standard driver, the culture driver. But in the NBA, it is star player. And if that star player will give permission to the coach and the organization to let him be led, it just changes the whole trajectory of the entire organization.
Wow. Coach, I have no follow-up for that. That was incredible right there. And the insight that you have, that's just priceless for me. And Coach, I want to thank you so much for giving up your time. I know getting your new job and getting things situated, recruiting and all the how fun that is and all the time that you got to spend with that. The fact that you give it up to talk hoops with me, man, I just really appreciate it.
Oh, no doubt, Coach. I appreciate you. You've been patient with me, and I appreciate you being that way. And it's something I always like. I always feel like it's an honor to speak, to anyone about basketball, especially on a podcast and like yours. But I appreciate you having me, and it's been great for me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.